Water. Good stuff, water. Excuse me. Very hot. How about water? We drink it. It's the mainstay of life on earth, isn't it? We bathe in it. We swim in it. Our economy depends on it. Producing energy and commerce. Our ships sail on it. Plants and animals which we consume, they need water to grow. Where does it come from? And how do we always seem to have enough? I'm very fortunate in the United States. For the most part, you all, provided mom and dad paid the water bill, have easy access to fresh, clean water. Simply a matter of walking up to the faucet, flicking the lever, and out comes cool, clear water. Safe to drink. We take our water for granted? I think we do. Earth's water is always being recycled. It does this through a process called the water cycle, or the hydraulic cycle, or the H2O cycle. And the water cycle is what we're going to be discussing here today. That's the topic for today, is the water cycle. First, let's get our little scientific thinking caps on here, and let's recall a little bit of previous knowledge we have that might relate to this subject. In earlier discussions, we discussed the matter, and we learned that matter can exist in three forms, or three stages of matter, which were what? Solid, right? What's the solid form of water? Ice, yeah. Hail, snow, liquid, obvious, liquid obvious, and gas. What would be the gaseous form of water? Steam, right? From your mom's iron or a locomotive. Right? And when we're talking about hydraulic cycle, we find water in all different states of its matter. We find it in evaporating in steam, we find it condensing back into liquid, and we find it sometimes falling and remaining as a solid on a mountaintop or in a glacier or the ice on a lake. Previously, we also talked about the sun during our studies with space and earth science. Remember back to our experiments with the sun and its heat and how we could use its heat to produce energy. Well, the sun is very important to the hydraulic cycle or the water cycle. Matter of fact, without the sun, it does not work. So, let's get into it, shall we? So we have recalled that the sun uses heat, and we use the radiant heat from the sun to run the water cycle. Alright, the water cycle itself is basically set into 6 repeating steps. Alright, our first step would be evaporation. The sun heats up on the water, the oceans and the water, in lakes and rivers and streams, and through that heat, through that radiation, the hydrogen molecules start to evaporate. When they evaporate, that means rise up, they cling together with a oxygen molecule, they become a water molecule. Alright, now they start to move up the air currents up into the upper atmosphere. They do this mostly by hitching rides on dust particles, smoke particles, tiny smoke particles, until they get up in the upper atmosphere. That whole process where the sun heats the water molecules and it rises in its gaseous form up into the upper atmosphere is called evaporation. Once it gets up in the upper atmosphere, it starts to cool, and water molecules start to stick to other water molecules and become bigger, alright? And they start to form clouds. This process, when they start to come together and form clouds, is called condensation. You all might see this form of condensation when you're drinking a cool drink on a hot summer day. It has ice in it. You pick it up and it appears, and you put it and take a drink, and you look, and the whole outside of the glass is dripping with water. That water is not coming from inside the glass, it's actually water molecules in the ambient air around us that are clinging to the side, and they're cooling, they're coming back into solution. Their gaseous state, they're condensing, coming back into their water state. So condensation into the clouds, that's our second step. As they condense farther, the pressure changes and temperature changes cause these water molecules to fall back to Earth. Either they fall back into the oceans or they fall back on land, and that, as we know, is called precipitation. Most precipitation occurs in rain, but we also know that it precipitates in snow, hail, fog, or sleet. We've all seen this. Alright? Once the rain, we're going to call it rain, in the form of precipitation, falls to the earth, it hits the ground. Some of it starts to flow off of the ground, but a great amount of water actually absorbs into the ground. This is called infiltration. This is the fourth stage of the water cycle. The water flows into the ground surface, and once infiltrated, the water becomes soil moisture, or what we call groundwater. Alright? Into the fifth, in a variety of ways water moves across the land. It includes both surface runoff or channel runoff as it flows. The water may seep into the ground, may evaporate in the air, or it becomes stored in lakes or in reservoirs, or be extracted for agriculture, for industry, or for other human needs. Alright, that's called runoff, the process where the water actually moves off of across the land and is either absorbed or is used. Okay, and there's also the last stage is called subsurface flow, of water underground, where we know that water from the infiltration phase, water absorbs in the ground, but the water can absorb deeper into the ground, and it can go very deep in the ground, and it makes these underground lakes called aquifers. Subsurface water may return to the surface like a spring, or maybe by mechanical means, say we pump it up for irrigation, or it may eventually seep into the oceans through forces of gravity. Eventually, through time, it seeps through rock. Sometimes water can remain in these underground aquifers for tens of thousands of years. Water returns to the land surface or lower elevation, where it's infiltrated, like we said, by the force of gravity. Groundwater moves very slowly and it's replenished slowly, so it can remain in aquifers, like we said, for tens of thousands of years. Okay, so there we've listed the 6 steps of the water cycle: evaporation, condensation, precipitation, infiltration, runoff, or subsurface flow. Are there any questions? It all seems so. Once again, the 6 steps of the water cycle, which I need you all to remember, they are in your textbooks, but these are the 6 enduring terms of the water cycle. They're testable, and we'll have a quiz on these later in the week. So as a bit of your take-home work tonight, I want you to review these 6 terms. Once again, 6 steps of the water cycle: evaporation, condensation, precipitation, infiltration, runoff, and subsurface flow. The 6 essential parts of the water cycle. So what I've done then is I've taken those 6 terms, those 6 steps of the water cycle, and I've put them on this graphic illustration of the water cycle. And we'll go through just the general chain of events that happens in the water cycle for us, so we can more accurately see and better describe how the water cycle works. We'll start right here at number 1 with evaporation. We know that water evaporates. The sun heats it. The sun being the major influence behind the water cycle. Heating up all these little hydrogen molecules, where they attach themselves to oxygen molecules, and they rise on up through the air currents, clinging to small particles like dust and smoke. They ride the air currents up into the upper atmosphere. Once in the upper atmosphere, things begin to cool. There's water that has moved into the gaseous form now begins to move back into the liquid form up at cooler altitudes, right? They begin to form clouds. The molecules begin to become bigger and bigger and bigger, and these clouds become bigger, and we have rain clouds forming. When conditions are just right, the barometric pressure and the temperature are just so, and we have conditions right for precipitation, our next number in the chain of the the water cycle. We have precipitation falling, and remember we went over the forms that can occur with precipitation. We can have rain, of course. I've got mountains here with snow caps, so we can have snow. I've got a glacier with ice. Alright, we can have hail, sleet. We all know the forms of precipitation comes in. So number 3 is precipitation. We see the energy falling back to Earth. It's warming again, falling back to Earth. Alright, lands on the Earth, or it could land in the ocean again. Doesn't necessarily have to land on land. And we come to our 4th stage of the water cycle, which is infiltration. Infiltration stage. The water actually soaks into the soil, alright, and it begins its journey back out to the ocean. Okay, at 5 we have runoff. The water collects in lakes and rivers and streams. Alright, from there it begins its journey back to the ocean as well, and it collects minerals along the way. Alright, run off from lakes, rivers and streams. And then, you know, some water achieves it absorbs much deeper into the earth, into subterranean aquifers, alright, where it can stay there for tens of thousands of years before it makes its way seeping slowly back out through the rocks and the earth back out to the ocean, where the process starts again. As luck would have it, I don't know whether you can hear it outside, but we're having some precipitation here in Virginia Beach. Seems fitting that I wrap it up on this. Before I wrap it up, I just want to do a quick review. Just remember, we're going to have a small quiz on this later on in the week when we meet again. So just the 6 steps, remember what they are. Take the time, do the reading in your manuals, in your text. Remember the 6 steps: evaporation, condensation, precipitation, infiltration, runoff, and subsurface. So let's make sure we know what all those mean, and see if we can, specifically I'm probably going to have you put those on a diagram for me for a little bit of a quiz. Also, okay then, well, that concludes our little study of the water cycle. If you have any questions, you know where to get a hold of me, and I'll be posting all of these notes on the website tonight, so be sure to look at those. Alright, thank you.